Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events in the world of Scientology. Welcome back from the Thanksgiving week holiday, and we're getting to it for the holidays. And what a week!
I thought maybe with holidays coming, things would slow down. This has been one of the biggest weeks all year, Chris.
It's big. There's some real stuff this week to tell you guys about. So we're going to waste zero time and get right into it, starting with David Gentili. This is one of these criminal Scientology stories. Take it away.
Jeffrey Augustine broke this story, and he's done a great job covering this for years now.
True.
Another Scientologist caught up in a fraud scheme. David Gentili, longtime New York OT Scientologist, big donor in New York. And he got involved with some non Scientologists in this thing called GPB Capital. I think the way Jeffrey explained it, he was really into buying up car dealerships or, waste management stuff, really kind of, typical sort of stuff that gets a little bit mobby.
Yeah,
But the
kind of
point was,
mafia adjacent work.
right,
Yeah.
right. But the point was that it got to be this 1.6, 1.7 billion dollar fiasco where prosecutors said they were running a Ponzi like scheme. They didn't call it an outright Ponzi scheme, which is where you take the early investors' money, you take the new investors' money to pay the old investors to convince them that things are actually expanding when they're not.
Right.
And it was something like a Ponzi scheme where they are moving investor money around. And anyway, David Gentili was convicted in federal court. This took years to prosecute him and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Now, he had a partner. This guy, Jeffrey Schneider, I think was his name,
Hmm.
and not a Scientologist, and he got 6 years. Now, both of them had a lot of money, so they were able to delay things and delay things. Finally, this last, just I don't know, early part of November, David Gentili's delays ran out, and he had to go to prison.
Yep.
So he starts serving federal prison. Like 11 or 12 days later, the White House grants him clemency, which means they have not zeroed out the conviction. He's still convicted of fraud, but they've commutated his sentence. So he has to serve not another day in prison. He was let out the day before Thanksgiving. Also, we just found out President Trump also, it took a while for them to put the clemency online. He also doesn't have to pay restitution. So it's saving him millions and millions and millions of dollars. Well, Jeffrey broke this news, by the way. He beat the New York Times to it, did a great job. What Jeffrey and I both realized was what nobody else, everybody covered this, from the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, everybody covered the outrage that President Trump had granted clemency to this $1.7 billion fraudster.
Hmm.
None of them pointed out. Now, see, his partner, Jeffrey, he hasn't reported to prison yet, but he hasn't been granted clemency. He's still scheduled to go to prison. Well, what's the difference between David Gentili, that got his sentence erased, and the other guy that's still looking at 6 years? Gentili's a Scientologist. Schneider's not.
That's
Okay.
right.
This is something that Jeffrey and I are trying to show people that, I don't know. We've seen this White House getting real friendly with Scientologists. Pam Bondi, of course, is a long relationship. She was the Florida Attorney General. She made speeches at Fort Harrison Hotel. We know that there's OT Scientologists involved in the second Trump administration. We know that Scientology, in their Freedom Magazine, they were cheering on Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice doing some things about protests outside of churches, and specifically a synagogue in New Jersey. We knew they were probably lobbying the White House about that. But the White House granting a Scientologist clemency for a $1.6 billion fraud? People's lives were ruined. So I don't know. I think this may be the most visible, most blatant favor that the White House has done for Scientologists. And you can look for at every news story about this in every media outlet, and not a single one has pointed out this guy's connection to Scientology, Pam Bondi's connection to Scientology, Trish Duggan, the most wealthy Scientologist in the world, on the Kennedy Center board. Uh, 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 what's the John C.
Oh,
Cole?
John P. Coles.
John Cole, the
Yeah,
attorney
John Cole. Yeah,
who was Trump's attorney fighting
yeah,
Meta and Google, is now the deputy envoy to Ukraine.
yeah,
He's an OT Scientologist, married to Greta Van Susteren.
that's right. We have
Uh,
Grant Cardone Instagramming from Mar-a-Lago this week.
I mean, Grant Cardone has had Trump on his 10X programs and spoke at Madison Square Garden. And now a Scientologist was let out of prison only 12 days into his 7-year sentence. I don't know, people. I think it's more evidence of how friendly the White House is with Scientology right now.
Well, very clearly, and all I can say is, if this doesn't sound your alarm bells, those are the facts. I don't really know that I have a whole lot more to say about it that I haven't already said. Tony and I have been breaking this down all year. These connections, and you can look to the America First Policy Institute and see Trish Duggan involved in that on the board of directors. You can look to connections, then, and OSA's mad about connections. Well, it's because they actually do matter sometimes, and in this particular case, this behind the scenes kind of stuff seems to all be rolling in Scientology's favor right now. And I think that's really sad, because Scientology, as I think we all know watching this show, is a corrupt, bad organization that hurts people, and they shouldn't be getting breaks like this. And it's certainly not David Gentili. As you said, he ruined lives. It also puts to waste all that taxpayer money and time and resources to put that man where he belongs, and then to have the Trump administration just wave a magic wand and it all goes away. It's criminal. It's just bad. It's really, really bad. All right. Now, conversely, somebody ended up in jail in Pinellas County. What is this story about?
Yeah, sitting in Pinellas County, there's a guy facing multiple mandatory life sentences
Hmm.
for SA attacks on a child. I'm saying it that way because YouTube will punish us if we spell out what we're talking about. We think we know what we're talking about.
Yep.
Horrendous crimes. He's accused of 30 incidents over a year-long period with a
Hmm.
child under 12 years old. And in Florida, that carries a mandatory life sentence in prison. He's pled not guilty. His name is Aaron Mathis. The reason that I know that this guy is the same Aaron Mathis in Scientology publications is I have talked to the family and friends of the family, and a family member, former family member, and confirmed that this Aaron Mathis, sitting in Pinellas County Jail, 57-year-old man who was working as a county employee for Hillsborough County next door in Tampa, doing IT work basically. Um, that this is the same Aaron Mathis you will find in Scientology publications going back 20 years. He was at he's from the Bay Area. He went to San Francisco State University and Golden Gate University, and then he ended up at the Stevens Creek org.
Mm.
Is I've talked to people there that remember him, and then like so many Scientologists, moved to Clearwater. He moved to Clearwater in 2010, and I don't think he was ever a church employee in Flag. I don't think he was just a Scientologist in Clearwater working for the county next door, Hillsborough County, and he's accused of this horrendous crime. So, I did two things when I wrote this story. I reminded people that L. Ron Hubbard in 1952 gave a lecture where he explained that all of us, since we're all trillions of years old as Thetans, in that time we have committed every horrendous crime imaginable, including the SA homicide of children. He spells it out. He describes it. It's disgusting. And it's a little bit in code. Sonny Pereira helped us decode this lecture, but that's what Hubbard is saying: is that all of us are guilty of these kind of things. And the result is what Sonny explained was this is why you don't turn in a fellow Scientologist. Because
Mhm.
who are you to turn in a fellow Scientologist for a horrible crime when you've committed far worse millions or billions of years ago on some
Yeah.
other planet?
Yeah.
So I
And
reminded,
further, and let me add to that since we're on that exact point right now. And further, the belief is that within the world of Scientology, we have the methods and techniques to actually handle why this person is doing that.
that's right.
I mean, in case nobody is thinking in Scientology that it's okay to do this to kids. And I want to be super clear about that. But they believe that if somebody's doing that, well, we have the only technology that's going to deal with it. What are you going to throw them in prison where they get, Guido dealing with them? That's not justice. That's not handling anything, according to Scientologists. And so, they twist everything up around this and let these people off the hook as a result.
Well, the other thing I did was I sent an email to Corinne Powell and asked her if the church had any statements about this situation, and I haven't heard back.
Okay. Okay, got
Of
it.
course.
Of course. Well, it's horrifying, of course, and I just want to be clear that that I've changed a lot since I came out of Scientology, right? But this kind of thing was never going to be, okay. Um, Jesus, this is just horrifying stuff. I was looking at it because I was familiar with Stevens Creek and managed a delivery there for a little while and whatnot, but this man is not familiar to me in any way. So hopefully the reels of justice roll
Okay.
forward. And if there's shenanigans because of Scientology there, that would be just whoa. Now this was an interesting story. Kurt Feshback. Haven't heard this man's name in years,
Yeah.
and he is the subject of what's up.
Well, at one point, the Feshback brothers were the top of the heap. I mean, and Mike Rinder used to write about this, that Kurt and his younger twin brothers, Joe and Matt, were these superstar investors who in the late 80s took advantage of a down market to short stocks. And what that means is rather than investing in companies that you help grow and make you money, you bet against companies. And if they fail, you make a lot of money. And so they were basically making a ton of money on the misfortune of others. And it made them famous. They got written up numerous times in the late 80s, early 90s. The Feshback brothers, man, they're like barracudas, man. If they're coming for your company, it's over. And so they were famous for being these cutthroat investor types. Meanwhile, they were totally committed to Scientology. There's actually a fourth Feshback brother, Dan, who was never involved in Scientology. But these three were big time Scientologists. And Matt Feshback is known for the fact that he gave the very first $1 million donation to the Church of Scientology. See, today we're so used to all these people getting
That's
their golden
right.
meritorious trophies and people donating 10, 20, 30 million dollars. But back in like 1990, that was an incredible idea that one person could give $1 million to David Miscavige and the IAS and the Church of Scientology. And he was rewarded by allowed, it was like 92 or 93, something like that. They let him do the superpower rundowns
That's right.
20 years before the superpower building itself was open to the public.
That's
So
right.
he was like the first Superman in Scientology history. So that's, I mean, this by the early 90s, mid 90s, these guys were legends. $1 million donation, first superpower, famous for their investing, totally committed to Scientology. They were the top of the heap, and everybody heard about the Feshbacks all the time. Well, it's been a different story more recently. Matt's twin brother Joe in 2011, sadly, had a heart attack and died while he was cycling. His daughter is Jessica Feshback, who was married to Tommy Davis and who they used to be Katie Holmes' handler,
That's
if you
right.
remember.
That's right.
Tommy's married to somebody else now. Matt Feshback, we were covering this several years ago, had this epic battle with the IRS that said that he owed them $3 million in back taxes. And it was really interesting because he kept arguing that they didn't have the money and they were very poor. At the same time, they kept turning in these expense reports that showed they were just living crazy,
That's
lavish lives. And it wasn't, I mean, this was the like business press that was writing, if you're trying to convince the government that you have no money, maybe the $50,000 personal chef is a bit much. It was really amazing coverage of this kind of thing, right?
Right.
So anyway, they eventually lost that, and they had to pay $3.5 million penalty settlement to the IRS. It was a very interesting battle. Don't see Matt around so much now at
Mhm.
Scientology events, although Kathy, his wife, is still very active.
She
Kurt,
runs the mission out in outside of Clearwater, right?
Bel Air, right?
Bel Air. That's the one. Yeah.
And so Matt fell on some hard times. Joe passed away. You just didn't hear too much about Kurt. You kind of
Mm-mm.
heard that, except we saw that one picture he took, the painting of him and his wife when she was very pregnant. Readers of the Underground Bunker are very familiar with it. Anyway, hadn't heard much about Kurt, and now it was pointed out to me. One of my readers said, "Do you know he's in bankruptcy?" So bankruptcy documents are very interesting. I don't know if you've ever gone through them, because when you're bankrupt, it means you owe more money than you have. And so all those creditors are in line trying to get what they can out of you. And you're having the court protect certain things for you. But you have to tell the court everything you own, down to, the stuff on the
Everything.
kitchen counter, right?
Yeah.
And it's so
Everything.
it's so embarrassing for people like Kurt Feshbach, right? He's got to list his home, each of his cars, everything in his bedroom, everything in the living room. It's all spelled out there. And so he estimated that he's worth about $1.6 million right now, almost all of which is his home, a $1.3 million house in Clearwater.
Right.
And he owes 6.5 million. So he's pretty well underwater. And
Right.
he's trying to get out of that and deal with that. And I look, I'm not, he's also, his attorney says also that he's dealing with multiple myeloma. So he's going through cancer treatments. He's 73. Listen, I don't listen. I had my own cancer battle. I don't wish that on anybody. I hope he
Mm-mm.
pulls through that okay.
Right.
But the attorney offered an interesting explanation for why Kurt's not doing so well. Because remember, this was the market maverick 30 years ago, right? What
Mm-hmm.
what 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 messed him up? Well, he explained in a document that the attorney submitted that Kurt had invested in a medical detox center in Newport Richey, Florida, with a business partner, Steve Hayes. The Steve Hayes. This guy keeps popping up all over the place. Steve Hayes is the attorney who showed up to buy the assets of the Cult Awareness Network in bankruptcy so Scientology could own the Cult Awareness Network. That's how we first
Right.
learned the name Stephen Hayes, this notorious figure. Steve Hayes was also Trish Duggan's attorney in that bizarre case I covered last year
Right.
of Trish trying to put a fellow Scientologist in prison in Switzerland.
That's right.
So this guy Hayes shows up in the funniest places. Well, Kurt's attorney said that Kurt and Steve Hayes invested in this medical detox center in Newport Richey. They expanded to another one in West Palm Beach, and then Google ruined everything. In 2017, Google made it harder for drug rehab places to advertise, and their business went down 70%. And basically, the business collapsed, and that's why he's bankrupt. Well, medical detox centers, I remember I used to report on Narconon more than I do these days, because Narconon is just not what it used to be. But what I remember about, so Narconon is this cold turkey approach, right? It's just quack approach that uses
Yeah.
Scientology ideas. When people come in, they can be really strung out, and so Narconon will send them to a medical detox so they can get some methadone or whatever to get them at least weaned out enough that then they can come to, because you can't just go cold turkey with somebody like that. It might kill them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to put them on a medical detox to calm them down, then come to narco. I remember that. I thought, a Scientologist like Kurt and Steve Hayes running medical detox, there's got to be a Narconon angle. So I contacted Luke Catton. Remember Lucas Catton? He was president of Scientology's flagship Narconon Arrowhead in Oklahoma. He's written a couple books. He's a great resource. He's been on TV. He's just a wonderful guy. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I explained to him what's going on, and I wanted to know if he knew anything about Novus Medical Detox, which is the name of these two places that Kurt Feshbach and Steve Hayes had. And what about this Google thing? Well, Luke said he remembers when they opened the first place up. He actually went down there and interviewed some of the people there in 2010 when it first opened up. So that's great. He's very familiar with it. And he said, yes, Scientology sent as many of their Narcanon people as they could to this Novus medical detox to dry out before doing Narcanon. But of course, only the ones that were, he said part of the problem was it wasn't super close to another Narcanon. But yes, that's what they were doing. But he also said that the Novus centers got their own clientele and not just Narcanon people.
Mm,
I asked him about the Google thing. He said it doesn't really explain what happened to Kurt Feshbach because, yes, Google did change the way rehabs could advertise, but it was short lived. It was only like 60 days, and
mm,
then they created this. Where they Google teamed up with Meta and somebody else to basically create kind of this, and maybe it may have been Twitter, I don't know, to create this sort of unified thing that everyone has to go through to advertise for drug rehab. And
mm,
he said, Luke said that even with that, other people have found ways to get around it and do SEO. So what he was saying was that just that Google changed the game in 2017 doesn't really explain why these places went out of business. But whatever, either way, Kurt's in trouble, and I think he'll be able to keep his house though, because his wife is there and she's not filing bankruptcy.
mm.
And but yeah, it's just interesting to see. I mean, I guess the summary, Chris, is, or the upshot is, this should not be happening to a super Scientologist, right?
Well, of super powered. I mean, hello, right? Especially the first off the line.
Well, that's his
Uh,
brother. That's
well,
his
I was his
brother.
brother, but yes, this is definitely not supposed to be happening to any of these people this way.
Right, right.
Like with the man who's currently, in Pinellas County jail that we were talking about. It's, well, does Scientology cause this? Well, I don't know, but it certainly didn't prevent it. Now, did it?
No.
So we can certainly point to that. And I don't know, a lot of people probably have a lot of things to say about the Feshbacks and where they've landed. Uh, I'm just going to say, well, them's the facts. All right, let's move on. So interesting story. Patty threw some
Oh,
statistics our way, and we have some evidence of Scientology shrinkage.
another great this week was something else, right? Patty
Mhm.
Moyer, she helps Christy Wachter at her website where there's such a good database. What's wonderful about this data that Christy Wachter curates and that Patty Moyer helps her with, this is data based on Scientology's own publications. They can't argue that it's outsiders making estimates. No, this is based on what Scientology publishes,
Yep,
and because Scientology documents everything, right?
they
And
do.
one of the things they do is they document OT completions. So, once you get up into the upper stratosphere of Scientology and you get up to the operating Thetan levels and you've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's two really big, I mean, there's a bunch, they're all very important, but OT3 and OT8 are the ones that people tend to talk about the most. OT3 is one where you learn the Xenu story and you first learn about body Thetans and you begin removing them from yourself. That's a big one. And of course, OT8 is the highest one that you can only get at the free wins. Well, Scientology publishes the names of every person who completes OT3 at the Advanced Oregon Los Angeles, who completes OT3 at the Flag Land Base in Florida,
Mhm.
and everybody who completes OT8 on the ship. And so, Christy and Patty and the others at that website are really good about getting those publications and entering those names. And Patty had this idea, let's take a look at those numbers over time. And what do we see? Here's a little variation, but they're basically flat
Yeah,
for the last 25 years.
yeah.
So OT8, the ultimate, the average over the last 24 years is 144 OT8s every year, and it's pretty consistent. There's definitely no upward trend. So, think how long it's going to take to clear this planet, Chris, if you're only making 144 OT8s all year. But
It's
also, it's just great to see it in graphic form, again, based on Scientology's own publications. that OT3 at AOLA, OT3 at the Flag Land Base, and OT8 at the Freewinds are all just flat over the last 25 years.
It
That's
is
just great
so.
work.
Oh, it's just great math, great work, and great record keeping on their part. And it's always been one of the great foundations of our ability to say, "Hey, look, this thing ain't going anywhere." That we can point to statistics like that, and that somebody's out there doing that tabulation. So, thank you, ladies, for doing that work. It's important to us. I never did get to say that really on screen like this. And all that being said, you're absolutely right. And when you start running some math, I mean, I'm no math guy. I'm definitely not. But you know, I feed this into a calculator. I come out with 0.0001% of the Earth's population, right? They're not even hitting that. I mean, they're barely hitting 144 a year. This is 12 a month. This is nothing. This is nothing. They're not even keeping up with the population decline in Bermuda at these rates. I mean, this is crazy.
I remember in 2012, I was still at The Voice, and they put out an ad. I'll never forget this. They put out a TV ad claiming 4.4 million new members a year.
That's right.
4.4 million new
That's
members
right.
a year.
That's right. We did
And
say that,
in,
didn't
in,
we?
in 2012, they're still putting out 144 OT8s worldwide. Come
Oh,
on.
it's just pathetic. It's just pathetic. Anyway, this is a great chance to laugh at the silly because it's true. These guys really are on a hamster wheel to nowhere. All right, now and this is why we say, by the way, that we talk about this shrinking, you know, sort of narrowing in on the VIP celebrity class of the group. This is why, because they're going nowhere.
Yeah.
Now we had the Florida AG weigh in on this
Oh,
Clearwater situation this week, and another level of this sort of government interference that we're sort of seeing. What was the deal this week?
well, you remember previously we talked, Chris, about this city council meeting in Clearwater that happened a couple weeks ago. There was a little bit of a fight on the dais over the fact that David Albritton, who is the swing vote over this Garden Avenue situation, had written personally to the Florida Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, asking for his opinion about who owns Garden Avenue. Real quick, Scientology owns the flag building. They want to build an L. Ron Hubbard Hall and an L. Ron Hubbard Park. And in between all that is this little road, South Garden Avenue. Scientology owns every piece of property around that road. And they just want the city to shut it down, shut down the right of way, so Scientology can decide when people can go on it or not. And you understand why. You got people walking from the park into the hall. They want to control it. Okay, I understand that. But the question then is, if the city vacates that right of way, the public right of way that's there now, how much should Scientology pay for the underlying roadway? The city thinks Scientology should pay $3 million. Scientology thinks that they already own the underlying roadway and they won't have to pay a penny. And of course, Brooks Gibbs and the Save the Garden folks think that there's a better use for that road and they shouldn't be vacating it for Scientology anyway. So David Albritton wrote to the Attorney General, asking what does he think. And as Bruce Rector, the mayor, pointed out, we know that David Albritton and the Attorney General are both being lobbied by Scientology to make this happen. He shouldn't have been writing to the AG personally. It should be the whole city council that does.
Right.
And predictably, this AG Uthmeyer weighed in this week and said, yeah, Scientology owns the road. If you vacate it, they own it. They don't have to pay a penny. So he's weighed in on Scientology's side. And it's been pointed out that before he was AG, he was running a nonprofit that received like a $1.8 million donation from Trish Duggan. But I mean, even that, I mean, that's kind of tenuous. Look, listen, there's just no question. Scientology has influence in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. right now.
Yep.
And James Uthmeyer just handed Scientology a little victory. Now, that doesn't mean that Scientology, that first of all, we don't know what Clearwater's going to do here. Now, it seems pretty obvious now that Albritton has now changed his view and he's gone from a no vote to a probable yes vote, and Scientology will get that street. As far as whether they have to pay $3 million, Clearwater can sue them, and then a court will decide, and it really doesn't matter what the AG thinks. So that's probably coming. Is they'll probably fight in court over whether they have to pay for it. Does Scientology end up with that street? I mean, they own everything around it, and I think the vision that the Save the Garden folks have, that Brooks Gibbs have, is really cool. I like it a lot, and they're doing this great initiative where they're trying to get it so that at least the people have a say and can vote themselves on whether or not to give this street up. They're trying to get that on the ballot, but at this point, with the AG, with Al Britton, it definitely seems to be leaning Scientology's way, unfortunately.
Interesting, very interesting. And I would prefer to see a ballot initiative. I think it would be very interesting to see what the citizens of Clearwater come out and say about something like that, and even how it would be, sort of marketed to them, to make that decision. That would be an interesting thing. But clearly, bringing in the Florida AG is a strong arm move, and an attempt to sort of, throw some power around. I couldn't help but wonder, in fact, as you were breaking it down, Scientology has these condition formulas, and one of them is the condition of danger. When you're in danger, this is what you do. And the very first step is bypass habits or normal routines. Meaning, if you have to skirt around someone who is normally who you would go to on your command chain and get the job done anyway, that's what you do. This is laid out very clearly in Scientology. And I wonder if somebody didn't explain this to Albrighton or something and be like, hey, man, this is what you need to do. Oh, okay, I'll do this. And bypass the mayor, bypass the city council, and go up to the Florida AG would be, my idea there. But regardless of whether they use Scientology on him or not, this is all pretty goofy that this is, there's just so much about this. But if David Miscavige can get out of paying $3 million, oh my God. One might wonder if he would pay 10 million to get out of paying the three, right?
I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen it with that other little street he wanted in Clearwater that he was willing to pay like 4 times what it was worth.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it's kind of funny that they're fighting over $3 million because for Scientology, it's no big deal.
It's chump change for them. They could write a check and be done. I mean, they could literally probably write it out of flags reserves, not even have to hit
No,
hit in
they just make
reserves.
Tom Cummins write the check. They
Oh,
make
yeah,
Chris write the check.
there
They
you
make
go.
Jim Bridgeforth write the check.
That's right. That's right. Easy peasy. There is the fact that Miscavige likes to fight, so maybe that has something to do with this too. Totally.
We say that it's no big deal to pay $3 million, but actually, what they're trying to do, I just realized, maybe it hit me, is set up a position in court where they're going to say, "Look, we own the roadway underneath the street. The attorney general has agreed with that. This What they're worried about is that the city won't get around to vacating it. They can then go in and say, this is discrimination against a religion. We own the roadbed. It's not about the $3 million. They want to be able to go and say, we own this thing. We own everything around it. And the city is fighting us of giving us our own property because they're bigots, religious bigots, and the attorney general has actually said it. That's what they're setting up there. Okay, so
Oh,
yeah,
that's a
this is
that's a really no, that's good. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you put it that way because it really I just couldn't help but start thinking House of Cards. You know, what I mean, it's just like this Machiavellian, sort of strategy. But I think you're absolutely right about that. Now we come to another Clearwater, important date this week. We've been covering this for weeks now, but this is the sort of week where we memorialize the death of Lisa McPherson. We talked about this last week, but Tony, go ahead and
December 5th is always a dark day for us every year. But especially this is the 30th anniversary of the death of Lisa McPherson. It's still important. We've talked about this, Chris, that it's still so important because we know Scientology's not learned a thing from this.
mm-mm,
They applied these quack L. Ron Hubbard principles to this poor woman who just needed some decent mental health care and people who understood what she was going through, and they killed her. And as I did 10 years ago with the 20th anniversary, I decided to report out day by day her last 3 weeks. So in real time, we would get a sense. It's not just all in the day, there's a lot of things that led up to those final hours for her.
that's right.
And it's grim stuff. I warn people that especially that final day's description is, and it's all from actual court documents, police reports. It's all documented, just horrible what this poor woman went through. And yeah, I can people are still very interested in this case. It's one of I call it Scientology's grimmest scandal. It's obviously got a lot of other terrible scandals that it's, been involved in, but this one's the grimmest, and it's just terrible. But I really appreciate the feedback I get from readers. If you go to today's Friday, the December 5th, and it's her final hours is what it's called. At the end of it, I've got links to all of the previous stories going back a few weeks. If you want to go through it yourself and see what she went through, it's just incredible. And also, I think some of it, some of the reporting is from Jeff Jacobson's great site about Lisa McPherson. Some of it, Janet Reitman did a really great chapter about Lisa in her book Inside Scientology, but some of it was newer reporting that I did, talking to Mark Headley, Tom DeVaught, some really great new reporting that shows how much David Miscavige was personally involved in this tragedy. And I think that's one of the things that's most important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. It's a real cautionary tale. Lisa McPherson is, because it is the extremity of consequence for getting involved in Scientology. Is she died, and she died in Scientology care. It wasn't just some ancillary, downstream consequence. Maybe that's literally what happened. She had a psychotic episode. They checked her out of a medical facility where she could have been getting professional treatment and help, and they put her up in the Fort Harrison, and they proceeded to not know what they were doing and applying standard Scientology to her and keeping meticulous records of this, which is how we know what we know. But even now, we don't know everything because Marty Rathman admitted that he had destroyed evidence about this whole thing.
Some of those records, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we still to this day, even the very worst of the worst, actually, he got rid of it. So we have what we know from what people remember. The reporting on this is really quite stellar. I hope you guys will check out Tony's reporting on this stuff. It's not better anywhere else. I'll put it that way. You're not going to go get the real story somewhere else. This is it, and all the details are here. Um, so that is what we 30 years. Wow, man. I was in a much different place 30 years ago. I can tell you that. I was just a fresh, wet behind the ears Sea Org member, actually. Oof.
I
Okay,
had I
so
had I had just published my first story about Scientology over a
wow,
month ago.
wow, and there we go. And now here we are, us old dogs. All right, now we come to the final story for this weekend. This is actually bigger than you might think in terms of what might be happening inside Scientology as a result of this. But first, Tony, could you break down this data breach? What happened? How did it happen? What do we know?
Right. So I want to make it real clear. This is criminal activity,
Hmm.
and Scientology was victimized. Okay.
Right?
This is a criminal ransomware gang. Chris and I looked this up. We believe it's pronounced Chilin, uh, uh, or Chilin, right?
Chilean,
Chilin,
Chilean,
Chilin,
Chilean.
Chilin,
That's right.
Quilin. It's thought to be a Russian ransomware gang, but it's a Chinese name. I think it means unicorn, but Chilin or Chilin is this ransomware gang. They hack into people's servers, uh, get a bunch of data out of it, and then threaten people. If you don't pay us, we're going to reveal all this information. When people then balk and don't immediately pay them, they will then start to leak that data out to convince people, look, you got to pay us. And that seems to be what's going on with the Church of Scientology. In particular, what was hit were St. Hill servers, right? The Advanced Org St. Hill UK, which is the UK headquarters, St. Hill Manor. Their servers were hit by this ransomware gang. And so the fact that this gang has released 22 screenshots suggests that they've already asked for a ransom, and Scientology has said, no, we're not going to pay you. And so now they're trying to convince them. So, I've already seen some people asking about whether, the idea of sharing these screenshots. And my answer is, look, this Chilean is a criminal organization, but we believe the Church of Scientology is a criminal organization as well. And it's harming families, it's ripping apart families, it's forcing young women to have abortions, it's extorting young people and old people. So I don't really have a qualm with looking at these what's in these screenshots, and I shared them on Friday afternoon at the Underground Bunker. They're fascinating. Now, these are hackers. They're looking around for, okay, what's sensitive information that they're going to freak out about and pay us, right? That's
Yeah.
their aim. They're not they're not journalists trying to find the best, most interesting information. They're hackers trying to figure out what few things. So it's kind of hit and miss. There's some really interesting documents, for example, a breakdown on every dollar spent on security at the IS gala, both in 2024 and 2025. And in 2019, that they hired guard dogs because they thought protesters might be coming on the campus. So some really specific, granular stuff about the amazing amounts of money that were spent on guards, private eyes, and limos, and an ambulance to have at the IS gala. Very interesting information. There's also some a list of 4 people who did not have visas and were going to have to leave the country or go to the U.S. And it was going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds each. So this is really consistent with what we've said, that they make a mockery of the U.S. religious visa rules and bring these people from places like Russia and Hungary to basically make them slave labor, cleaning hotels, claiming that they're religious workers, and just exploit these visas. Well, here's some actual evidence that there are some UK workers who are there violating the local visa rules. So that's very interesting.
Yep.
Some of the other stuff, it's funny, we need this much money to put out that many mailers. We need this much money to feed people. It's interesting stuff. But like I said, it's a little bit hit and miss because maybe they didn't know exactly what we'd be most interested that might be on the UK servers, but that's okay. I don't want to give criminals any hints on what they should be doing. But you were telling me that this is just going to be a just massive problem inside Scientology.
Oh my God, gigantic. I cannot overstate the reaction right now that I am absolutely positive is happening within Scientology's within Miscavige's inner circle and filtering all the way down. There is a subunit within the Church of Scientology called INCOM, the International Network of Computer Organized Management. And it's basically the computer unit of Scientology. They're the guys who actually figure out the internet unit and all the safeguards and wrote the internal finance system for the church. It's all custom made software produced by INCOM. In the 1990s, there was a data breach because a guy working at Incom put some information out on the internet that he had gotten from inside that he shouldn't have done. And he was doing it to defend Scientology. It's a long story and it's very interesting. We won't tell it today. But when that happened, I had just gotten into the Sea Org in Los Angeles in PAC, and the entire wing of one of those of that winged building that has the Scientology sign on it, the fourth, I think it was the second floor or fourth floor, which one of those two, the entire wing was closed off, and for 4 months, no one could go in or out of that place. Every Incom staff member was under quarantine up there, and nobody could ask questions. It wasn't your business. Turn around and don't and just walk away, right? This ain't your concern. And I found out after I left. Okay, that whole thing went down. And after I left, I found out it was nothing but sec checks and heads on pikes and people being kicked to the curb and RPF'd and everything else at that time. And that was for an internal data breach of one document leaking onto the internet that made what's her name, Hamill, look a little
Linda
awkward.
Hamilton.
Linda Hamill, yeah,
Right.
made her look a little awkward if I remember right. This is ransomware.
Well, and
This
let's
is
and
right.
let's also point out, somebody can say, "Hey, Ortega, why are you criticizing what they put up?" Because they probably have far worse that they're holding on to. That's
Oh yeah,
important to keep in mind. Remember, these are hackers, they're ransomware criminals. They want Scientology to pay a ransom for the information they have. They've
yeah,
put out a sprinkling of things to let them know, listen, we really have this stuff. You need to pay up. And so the threat is they have far worse that they're holding on to that they have not released. So that's what they're holding over Scientology. Scientology's got to figure out what to do. And let me ask you this: how happy would Scientology be to go to the law enforcement agencies about this?
Oh yeah, no, forget it. I mean, like they're gonna have to. Obviously, they would, but Miscavige is probably having pounding headaches right now over this. Again, I can't overstate how many people right now are probably in serious, serious trouble up and down the command structure from the entire UK base. I have no doubt right now that entire base is on lockdown and that you are not going to see hide or hair of any of those people for some time. From that level to income to everybody in between. Because if they got OSA information, right, none of this information is supposed to even be accessible from outside networks. That's how tight the security is supposed to be on this is the computers are not even physically connected. So somehow somebody screwed up in such a significant way, and Miscavige is going to want and not rest until he has a list of the names of every single person responsible for this. So, I mean, I'm just saying we might not hear hide or hair of some people for a little while because of this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's big. It's big inside. Um, and it was grim for people. It was pretty bad. It was ethics all around, sec checking and everything else. Um, so there
Big
you
week.
go.
Big week.
Yeah, big week. Big week. We'll have to see what happens on this in terms of that ransomware. One of the interesting things I checked into on this is that Scientology is really a pretty random target for this group. This group goes after high value targets they believe can pay, and they go after businesses, corporations, healthcare NGOs, stuff like that, like big stuff. It's not common that they hit churches, but apparently over the last about 10 years ransomware has been a job of decreasing returns,
Oh,
and this last quarter it was only about 18% of companies were paying the ransom. So
interesting. Hmm.
that's probably why they were shooting out to random places like Scientology. There's no moral crusade going on with this particular group,
Okay. Okay.
just as further information on it that I dug up. So, okay, folks. So that was our week. What a week! Yeah, thanks, Tony, for all the wonderful reporting on this. What a breakdown. Uh,
And you always ask me what's coming, so I will point out today,
that's
Saturday, I will be posting a little something that a week from tonight will be the New Year's Eve taping at the shrine. So a week from tonight on Saturday, December 13th, David Miscavige will be in Los Angeles and they will be taping, pretending that it's New Year's Eve, and they will count down at midnight and say Happy New Year 2026. But it's taped on December 13th, and then it's shown at all of the Scientology locations on New Year's Eve, December 31st. So then they can all count down together, blah blah. So anyway, the New Year's Eve, Scientology has basically three big events each year: New Year's Eve, L. Ron Hubbard, IAS. And so this year, IAS and New Year's are very close together because they had the IAS so late. But yeah, so next Saturday night, David Miscavige will be in Los Angeles, people.
do you think Gentili might get a freedom medal this next year? All right, folks. There on the screen is the address to Tony's Substack. Go to it, subscribe, get your daily notifications, check back in with us on Fridays for the wrap up. See you guys next week. Bye bye.